Today's first reading that Scott read is from the book of Revelation. And it's a passage that remembers some of the heroic witnesses to the faith. Psychologists tell us that our memories are what form our sense of identity. Events and persons which do not stick in our memories really don't exercise much influence on us at all. But the things and people we remember, however, have the power to shape us and mold us and direct us long after they are past and gone, even when we think they are buried deep. To a large extent, we are what we remember. I don't mean primarily the kind of remembering I used to do in cramming for tests or the to-do lists we sometimes think of. I'm talking about a much deeper sense of remembering. There were two pastors had lunch one day. They had gone to college together, had actually been roommates. 25 years had passed. They had not kept in touch or seen each other in all of those years. When they gathered for this lunch, they didn't talk about anything serious. They just started reminiscing and remembering together. They sort of relived a little bit of their college days, and as you would kind of guess, names of significant people came up. And with that in their own heads would have been the memory of their faces and voices. And it was a reaffirmation of what those people had meant to them, whether it was good or in some cases not so good. But with that kind of remembering of things in the past came a deeper understanding of who these two pastors were at this moment in time and compared to what they had been 25 years earlier. You and I have probably had similar types of experiences. The strange thing is when we do significant remembering of the people in the past who have had important influences on us, we get a sense of our place in the world, and we sometimes get a glimpse of where we might be headed. In short, I think memory can really ultimately lead us to hope. And I think that's what happens in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is really a difficult book to understand, but John is writing to 7 congregations in Asia Minor near the end of the first century, possibly into the beginning of the second century, and it's been about somewhere between 50 to 70 years since Jesus was crucified. There was this new movement of people who believed that Jesus had been raised from the dead, and these followers began to spread throughout the Roman Empire. Christians, by the turn of the first century, made up a significant block of the population, and they were recognized at least as a potential large political force. And as you would guess, that made the Emperor Domitian a bit on edge, and he instituted this Pledge of Allegiance, if you will. In Domitian's version, all Roman citizens and all the subjects of the kingdom were required to offer once a year in the state temples a sacrifice to the emperor saying, "You are divine, Emperor Domitian." Failure to do so was treason and was punishable by imprisonment, exile, or even death. So the emperor figured he could ensure the loyalty by making sure they did this. And I think he was a bit surprised. By these Christian people. He found them to be incredibly devoted to their God, just as the Jews before them were. When these Christian people at this turn of the century were threatened with exile or even death for refusing to take this oath of loyalty, they reacted surprisingly. They didn't revolt. They didn't preach insurrection. They didn't try to do anything other than be faithful. And what happened was they gave their lives. Some ended up being burned at the stake. Some were thrown into arenas where lions were kind of let loose on them. And all the while, we know that so many of them sang praises to God and spoke words of forgiveness to those who persecuted them. Those were the first martyrs. And without them, we probably wouldn't be here. But the word martyr literally means witness. Their witness to the faith in Christ was so strong, they were so willing to go to the death rather than compromise. We give thanks for their integrity. They were simply not allowed their faith to be shortchanged. And to these Christians who were living in a time of great ordeal, John, one of their pastors, was sent into exile on an island called Patmos. And the way he could continue his ministry was to write letters, but he had to write coded, kind of bizarre letters, but they were visionary letters. And as you read through it, he was inviting those who read what he wrote to use their imagination. He was kind of giving them a glimpse of a different reality than the one they were experiencing right in front of them. They were being confronted with hardship on a daily basis, and what John was trying to do is give them a glimpse of something different. He imagines them to picture God up in heaven and God's people up in heaven. So as these, perhaps as fire was beginning to burn, as they were being threatened, or as a lion was coming at them, or any other hardship, John was writing so they could have some hope that above and behind and within this horrible reality, there was a whole different reality in operation. He calls them to remember the example of faithful people who have witnessed their faith in God without flinching, and turn their eyes toward a future where they're going to be a part of something spectacular, something where they're a part of the saints from every tribe, nation, every language. They'll all be singing the song we sang just a little bit ago. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. You know, the memory of past faithful ones was to inspire them to be faithful in their own time. It was John's way of saying this is how we can cement the people of God together, past, present, and future, into this spectacular group of people. You know, this remembrance was to renew and strengthen them for the journey ahead. You and I, we need to remember those who have gone before us. I'm probably telling you something very obvious, but it's very important for us to do that. What sense of family solidarity can we have if we do not remember precious people like our fathers and mothers, our aunts and uncles, our grandparents and great-grandparents, our nieces and nephews and children who have gone before us, who have made such an impact on our lives? And if it's so important that we remember our beloved family, how vital is it that we also remember our ancestors in the faith? How can we hope to know how our faith relates to our present circumstances if we know nothing about how it gave hope and meaning to those people who have gone before us? American people right now kind of lack a historical memory. Far too many lack historical memory. So many in our present day live divorced from the past with little hope of that past guiding the future. We cannot understand who we are and who we will be if we don't understand where we have come from. American people in many ways have lost this memory, and it kind of can creep into churches and religions as well. We can ignore it, can actually devalue what generations of Christian people have learned about God before us. Sometimes people can become ignorant of theology, ignorant of great traditions of spirituality and worship that have come before us that can enrich our journey. Sure, there's some really bad stuff in the past, but there's a lot of blessing that we've ignored that could really enrich us. Too many people live only for the present moment, and they get stuck in the spiritual impulses of the present. We don't always remember that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And if we can get any glimpse of God at all, it's probably only because actually we've had faithful witnesses along the way who have helped us to see. And so many of us in this room, we know that one of the reasons we can experience God is because there's someone who lives in the loving embrace of God now who taught us about Jesus, who made a difference for us. These giants of faith upon whose shoulders we stand are not necessarily always giants in the world order. You know, a few are. You know, Paul wrote much of the New Testament. We consider him a giant because of the billions of people he's influenced. We have people like St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Teresa of Avila, Martin Luther. We've heard of him. John Wesley, Mother Teresa, Oscar Romero. These and a few others are certainly people who have had worldwide influence. But most of the giants of faith for us are unheralded and unknown to most of the world, but they have personally touched us and gave us hope. You and I know many quiet saints who have visibly manifested what Jesus talked about in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst to do the right thing. Today is a day for all of us to remember the saints, all those who have walked the path of faithfulness to God before us, but especially those who we've encountered on our journey, who have helped make us who we are as people of God. You know, in just a couple minutes from now, we'll gather for communion, and we will remember once more the most important story. We'll remember the story of Jesus as we eat bread, drink the wine in remembrance of Jesus. And as we do that, we remember that he is going to continue to be present with us, helping us to know who we are, giving meaning to the journey that lies in the future. And maybe we'll just get a glimpse of how we can simply trust him to lead us into the future. But we realize we don't gather with just the people in our midst. We gather as part of the communion of saints. Pastor Kate, in just a couple minutes, will say, and so with all the people of earth, the company of heaven, we praise your name and join their unending hymn. That's who we're in fellowship with this morning, all the saints in earth, all the saints in heaven, who by their faithful witness to Jesus offer that precious gift of hope. Amen.